Aloha, namaste. This is Radha Home, and I'm here with our total solar eclipse forecast for this coming week, and much more. This is quite the exciting week for us here on Earth. On April 19th into the 20th, we're going to have our new moon, the moon and sun coming together, and this is also going to have a solar eclipse as part of it. Some of you may have heard this is a very rare hybrid solar eclipse. That basically means that for part of the time, it's going to be a total solar eclipse where the moon is completely blocking out the sun from our view here on Earth. And for part of the time, it's going to be an annular solar eclipse where you'll see that ring of fire around the sun. Of course, you won't be seeing it at all unless you are in Australia or one of the neighboring islands near there. So there's a lot to talk about because there's a lot of excitement, whether you see it or not. We have several other planetary shifts happening at the same time. So I'm going to dive right in. Our new moon and this eclipse is happening in the sign of Aries, and it's happening in the very first star of the 27 nakshatras, the original zodiac used in the Vedas. And this first star is called Ashwini. It's the twin horseman. And in the story of this star, Surya, which is the god of the sun, and his wife Sanjana, which is she's often referred to as the clouds or consciousness or perceptivity. She is tired of being with him because he is so very hot. So she asks her father to do something about it. And he tries to shave off some of the rays of the sun to make him just a little less bright. And he uses these rays and forms the Sudarshan chakra that Vishnu uses, the discus that he flies. But he's still too hot and she can't hang out with him. She needs a break. So she asks her sister Chaya to step in for her. And she does. And she goes and takes a little vacation. Meanwhile, time passes and things move on, and Chaya and Surya consummate, and Chaya bears two children. One is Saturn, who is our planet of time and karma and humility, and the other is Yama, the god of death. When Sanjana returns and finds the fruits of their coitus, she is furious. So she turns herself into a mare and she gallops down to earth. Surya realizes what happened and is, feels horrible. And so he then turns himself into a stallion and gallops after her. And they gallop across the earth until they come back together and they make love. And two twin horsemen are born. And these are the Ashwini twins. They're the physicians of the gods. They are keepers of Ayurvedic wisdom. And they bring quite a lot of healing energy and knowledge of Ayurveda and the remedies of the earth plane on which they were born. They also have this quality of the gods and this connection with truth, with consciousness, and with clarity, with perception. So the sun is actually exalted here in Ashwini. This is the place where we have the highest connection to source, the most capacity to be in our own authority and to lead with this sense of power and also the sense of action. Horses are four-legged animals and they go and they do. And Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. So it's where we're really moving forward on something and not always with, the time necessary to really mull it over. There can be a hasty quality here as well. And since there's twin horsemen, there's two of them, it's important to be aware of whether or not the two horses are going in the same direction and if all parties are on board. This particular new moon, though, is of course also the first eclipse of our year. And it is being eclipsed by the North Node Rahu. Rahu is smoky. There is a lot of illusion and delusion where Rahu is. He is the part of the nodes. The two nodes are Rahu and Ketu that are the eclipse points. So wherever they are, they stay. And they're called Chayagraha. So like Sanjana's sister, they're shadow planets. and they only appear when the sun, the moon, and the earth are lined up for eclipses. So in this new moon eclipse, where the sun is the one being shadowed, Rahu, the north node, who is of new karma, he is the head cut off from the neck down to the body. So he's not attached to any of the past wisdom. He's where we are with a wide open mouth, voraciously eating everything in sight, very much obsessed with whatever we're focused on. So in this case, it's going to be our power, and particularly whatever area of your life the sun rules. So whatever area of your life Leo is, the power is, that's where you hold your power. And so he's going to be focused on that. And then it's going to be a lot of new energy, stops and starts, not necessarily taking advice, not necessarily learning from our mistakes, definitely not bringing in that past life wisdom that we so desperately need when we're initiating something new. So we can expect to have a lot of power, as it is his exaltation point, and to really feel that power, but to also maybe feel it more than it actually exists. Rahu exaggerates, it blows up out of proportion what something is. And it also has a quality of suspicion. There's this foreignness where, you know, we don't believe other people are telling the truth because sometimes we're not always fully telling the truth. There's this, you know, unwillingness to listen, as I said, where we just get a message or we receive some input, and often it feels like it's coming from somewhere else, because with the nodes, that's where we are receiving our information. They're not of this world. They're not actual bodies in the sky. So they don't bring us that same grounded energy and that same tangible energy that the other grahas bring us. So we might receive a message, we might receive some, you know, insight that we should go do something, because Rahu always wants to go do something, and set off in that direction on our two horses, and then realize that we were in a cloud of illusion and delusion. So it's really important in all eclipses, but particularly this one, to really sit with ourselves and our connection to source, which we do when we meditate, to not be around a lot of noise and clamor or in the midst of doing, you know, busy errands and things like this, because it can be really hard to get clear downloads. And instead, they might be very affected by whatever stimulation is around us. So a very, very good time, particularly on the 19th leading into the eclipse. It's going to be, you know, the actual time of the eclipse period, I think, is from 3:34 Hawaii time, which is 6:34 p.m. Pacific time, to 8:59 p.m. Hawaii time, which is running into midnight on the west coast of the United States. So that span is sort of the entirety of the eclipse. There'll be the max point is at 6:16, and 6:12 is the point when the sun and moon are exactly conjunct. 6:12 p.m. Hawaii time, 9:12 p.m. on the 19th Pacific Standard Time. And then, of course, that moves us into the next day on the 20th, when we get to the East Coast of the United States and beyond. So we really want to spend the 19th, no matter where you are, even if it's happening on the 20th, it's going to be earlier in the day. So you want to spend the 19th really in this, you know, as much as possible, decluttered space, meditative space, where you can really receive messages, because there can be profound insights, particularly, you know, depending on what the sun is ruling for you and what house Aries is in your chart, which will, of course, have to do with your rising sign. And if you've been keeping up with my reports, then maybe you saw the most recent video I did with Nirja from Love Digits on why we use the rising sign over the sun sign in our forecasts and our weekly forecasts. And if you do keep up with those as well, the weekly forecast, the weekend stars for this week, has tips for each person, not only on what this new moon eclipse means for you and what this new cycle is setting off, but also on the other important shifts that are happening, which I'm about to launch into. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see what I am speaking of. We have here our moon and sun in Ashwini, and we also, and Rahu, and we also have Mercury here in Bharani in Aries, where he's been for some time. Mercury and Mars are in this exchange of sign. Mercury's is in Aries, Mars is in Gemini, and they're sending some information back and forth to each other. Our discernment might be a little more powerful than it would be with Mercury in Aries, which means that we don't have high discernment when Mercury's in Aries, because we tend to be very quick to decide right, wrong, black, white. This is the way I'm going. And we don't take the time to really listen or hear all the information, or even be flexible enough in our mind to really form solid opinions based on facts, based on what is. And Mars in Gemini also doesn't do so well for very similar reasons. It's because this brings our sense of anger out. When Mars doesn't have a physical task and a goal that's leading somewhere, we tend to get agitated, because Mars is a very physical planet. It has to do with our action. And in the land of Gemini, this is action that's based in, computers and research and information. And it's kind of a steady stream. There's not really necessarily an end to it. There can be, we could discipline ourselves to write something we've been meaning to write, or to really thoroughly research something we've been meaning to research. We can also discipline ourselves around our communication skills, which would be a really big blessing to everybody if we could learn to speak with more sincerity to what actually is. This is what my experience is. This is what my feelings are. This is what I'm having, and not so much projection and blame and judgment as we often do. Nonetheless, neither of these planets are in very high intelligence in their sign, but when they have an exchange, they give each other a little leg up. So Mercury gives a little more discernment to Mars. Mars gives a little more courage to Mercury and decisiveness. But Mercury is going to be going retrograde on the 21st. So we have, well, this is the 20th because of how I was doing it for Hawaii time, but we could go back. I don't even need to go back. Earlier in the day, Mercury on the 21st will be going retrograde. And as Mercury retrograde is very famous, I can imagine that people know this means we are going to be stalled. And actually leading up to and into this eclipse, Mercury's stationed. So we're already stalled. Where maybe things aren't going through with our communication or with our emails or with our computers. Maybe we're finding ourselves having these, these stuck moments, and that will start to back up as Mercury goes retrograde, teaching us that we need to review the facts and figures, all those quick decisions we made and all those quick answers we thought we had and our quick communication. Perhaps there's a little review necessary. Perhaps we need to go back and see what all the information was that we didn't necessarily collect the first time around. So of course, again, this is going to really depend on what your rising sign is and what Mercury rules for you as to how it's going to affect you. If you are a Gemini or a Virgo rising, it's going to affect you quite a bit because it's your ruling planet. So it's your ruling planet going backwards. You're going to feel like everything is reversing for you. For other people, it will rule different areas of their life. But we can imagine that when we think of messages coming during an eclipse and this sort of download that just comes and we're like, okay, this is what I need to do, that this might stall our action. So if we feel like, okay, this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to move forward, maybe going forward won't be as easy as we think. Maybe we need to go back and review those messages, ask for a rewind from the cosmos. What did you say again? What exactly was that message? Maybe it's a good time to write down the things that come to us before we run out and act upon them. Because often when Rahu's involved, and particularly in a sign like Aries, where everything's so fiery and wanting to just initiate and start and not really wanting to check in with others, it's a good time to at least check in with yourself, at least jot down what you're thinking and what your ideas are and give yourself a review, even if you're unwilling to listen to others. The other thing that's happening on the 21st is Jupiter is jumping into Aries from Pisces. Jupiter's spent a year in Pisces, and this is his own sign, this watery, mystical realm where we're really connected to the oneness of everything and our higher beliefs. When he jumps into Aries, he crosses what's called the Gandanta point. This happens between all the water and the fire signs. And it's a knot, it's a karmic knot. And we often don't, bother to untie it. We jump over it. We feel discombobulated and confused. And we move forward into the next phase, the fiery phase, right? We're coming out of water into fire. if we can kind of slow our roll a little, we might be able to see some of what is ending and what we are trying to begin, and perhaps unwind some of what it is that's knotted for us. Because every time we just leap over these Gandanta points, we're sort of like jumping over a void and we're not connecting the dots. Somewhat similar to the relationship between Rahu and Ketu, where there's a cutoff and we're not getting the past wisdom. We're just eating the new stuff and not assimilating it. Well, this is an opportunity to really sit with what we've been learning in this Piscean phase. And while we might feel very confident in what direction we're moving forward with our wisdom, our teachings, Jupiter has to do with our capacity to access higher wisdom and also to teach, right? So maybe we've really been ruminating on all these things and we want to set off in the direction of what we're going to teach. But pause a minute, because for the first full degree of Aries, Jupiter's in this sticky place, in this naughty place of the Gandanta point. And he's also joining this eclipse energy, right? He's joining the sun in Rahu and Mercury retrograde. So discernment, the other side of wisdom, is delayed and inverted and not necessarily producing. So we have a real need to take our time, despite the fact that that's not going to be what we want to do, right? We're not going to feel inclined to do that. So this is one of those situations where we need to actually override our ego and our desire to just kind of say, well, it feels good to me, or I have this instinct, or I have this, this impulse to do something, and to kind of actually actively override it. And of course, many people won't, and that's okay too, because we're all on whatever path we're on, but we will see that there's some impact from that, right? There's going to be some impact from hastily moving forward, and likely consequences, and at least the consequence of having to go back and redo some things will come up for us. Overall, Jupiter in Aries is going to bring us much more into the action part of what we believe. So whatever we've been thinking, or again, ruminating on, we might actually start to take action on once Jupiter really gets his land legs and is moving forward with the horses, with the rest of the pack, I guess. Whatever, I can't think of what it's called right now. The herd, the rest of the herd. So these two things are pretty significant. Jupiter changing signs for the first time in a year. That's a massive shift. And I'm going to do a full report on that with the breakdown for each of the 12 rising signs. So if you're on my email list, you'll just automatically receive that. If you're not on my email list, you should get on it so that you can receive that. And then you'll also, be receiving the breakdown for the new moon, solar eclipse, and the tips and recommendations for that. The other thing that there's tips and recommendations on this particular month for is Akshaya Tritiya. We could see that the moon has now moved here into Taurus, where the moon is exalted. So every year after the new moon in Aries, eclipse or not, we have what's called Akshaya Tritiya. It's the third lunar phase after the new moon in Aries, when the moon moves into exaltation in Taurus and the sun is in exaltation in Aries. So both of our luminaries, our connection to source, the sun, and our mind and our emotions, the moon, are exalted in their highest place in the sky. We have the most clarity there. The moon is exalted, particularly in the start of Kritika, which is ruled by the sun and has the deity of Agni, which is fire, as its deity. And this brings a lot of sight. Kritika is commonly known as the Pleiades. And this sight that we get from the fire element allows us to see through some of our emotions. The moon can be very tumultuous as she moves around, and our mind and our emotions are also tumultuous as we move through our days. So in this particular place, we're able to cut through the crap, basically, and see more clearly. Kritika is the cutter. It's to cut. And in the story around this is actually the story of how Mars himself is born. The wives of the sages are cut off from their husbands and sent to the sky as this constellation, the Pleiades. So this particular day, this is really late Hawaii time. This is 6:12 p.m. So Akshaya Tritiya is actually really April 22nd. And on the 23rd, the moon will still be in Taurus. And we can see there's also a joining with Venus, who's the ruler of Taurus. So particularly on the second day, not on the 22nd, on the 23rd, we'll see the moon and Venus joined. And I can just leap ahead here. Well, I guess later in the day on the 22nd, Hawaii time, but of course it's much earlier here than it is most of the places of people I'm speaking to. We'll see the moon and Venus joined, and this will bring a lot of peace after that fiery new moon and eclipse, right? This will bring more connective energy. Venus in her own sign wants to connect. We want to get along. Venus herself has been in Aries for a while and is only been for a couple weeks here in Taurus. So this feeling of wanting to make amends and feel good and, have pleasure and harmony with ourselves and others, and eat good food and, nurture the earth and nurture our bodies. These are all qualities that come up when Venus is in Taurus. Venus and the moon joined together can bring this element into our sight, into our clarity that we might be having, in that grounded energy of the moon, and we might become a little overindulgent. The thing about Akshaya Tritiya is that it's said to be a day of investments. Particularly, people will buy gold on this day, and they'll pray to Lakshmi, the goddess of abundance, and Vishnu, the sustaining presence that allows us to maintain. Akshaya means never diminishing. The A is the never, and the Kshaya is the diminishing. So it never diminishes. Whatever we're putting our energy into, whatever we're investing, doesn't diminish. So this is why people might invest in something like gold, because they don't want their gold to diminish, right? We immediately turn to this material realm of money. But of course, the money is reflective, and the gold is reflective of so many things. It can be our spiritual gold. It can be our relationships. And for each of us, it's really going to be wise to put our energy forward into something different, which is why I wrote that for each of the 12 signs. What's a wise investment for Akshaya Tritiya for your sign, for your rising sign? So you can look that up on the stars this week and see what suggestions I've made. But also for all of us, we need to be really careful on this Akshaya Tritiya, right? Because Mercury's retrograde. So our discernment is going to be delayed, and also in Aries. So there's this impulsivity, and Jupiter, the planet of generosity and abundance, is also in this Gandanta point and freshly in Aries. So all of the things that help us with choices such as investments are in this kind of wobbly or delayed state, and we might not be able to move forward. Maybe we have a really good investment and Mercury's delay stalls us, and we're unable to, send that email or push that button on our computer or whatever it is. I imagine the way that people now invest in things looks like. And then Jupiter can bring us this impulsivity, but this, this lack of stability, because he hasn't fully moved into the sign yet. So we need to be aware, particularly with Venus join, that we might be moving really strong towards comfort, really have a lot of desire, and be putting our energy and investment into something that, maybe should diminish. Maybe we're not sending our energy in the way that's going to be most aligned for us in the long run. So this is an interesting Akshaya Tritiya. There's every year, the sun and the moon are both exalted, but all the other planets are doing whatever they're doing. And while Saturn is, in his own sign still, and Venus is in her own sign, bringing intelligence with relationships, Saturn's bringing intelligence with our caution and our humility and our desire to help the world and help others in society. We have a lot of impulsive energy here and a lot of confusion and delusion. So it's a good time to really mull things over, take time before we make choices, and really be aware of what is and is not concrete. What is in this land that is still of dreams or of potential future, and what is of this earth, and really grounding us and landing us. So this is a lot. I'm going to stop here. This is going to be, I'm doing this in advance, so this is going to be a very intense week for us, with a lot of shifts. And the move into the end of the week, as we move into Akshaya Tritiya, is going to feel a lot calmer, a lot more peaceful, and a lot more grounded. So really allowing yourself to invest perhaps in your relationships and in your self-love and self-care is a wonderful way to celebrate what portal we've just walked through and what intensity we've been experiencing in this time. So we also have, right after the new moon, we have Matangi Jayanti, and this is the goddess Matangi behind me in her yantra form. I spoke about her last week too, because I've been working with her quite a bit, and she can help us with our thoughts and our capacity to take our ideas and bring them into the manifest world, and to not contain them by societal standards, to allow us to really allow that wild part of us, and that part of us that's very free, to come out. And particularly in our artistic expression, so particularly in our writing or in our music, or something like that. So if we have any way we want to put forth our creativity in this world, this can also be a really good time for that, particularly with that that Venus moon conjunction. I hope this finds you well. And again, if you have not already signed up for my email list, www.radhahomeyoga.com. The link should be at the bottom of this video, and you can get details on what exactly each of these things means for you. And if you don't understand why we use the rising sign, you can check out that video that really explains in detail why we focus on the rising sign, because it really shows what's happening to you, to your physical body, what you're actually doing in the world, and what karma that's creating for you, because the actions you take today give you your choices tomorrow. Namaste. Happy new moon and eclipse.